Okay, good morning, everyone. Thank you for, let me just minimize this. Thank you for your time and your interest in our event today. Before the event could start, I would like to give you some housekeeping notes on the Zoom platform so that we can go and get started with this. We have quite a few participants today on the call, so please, if you have any questions or comments, please put them in the notes section of our dialog box and we will be able to answer them from there. Okay, so we are organized in a Zoom webinar dedicated to host a large size virtual conference. So now there are some features of Zoom that I'd like to let you know about that we're going to be using today. You have the ability to select either English or Vietnamese with the interpretation button that you'll see at the bottom of your screen that looks like a globe. You also can use the question and answer function to ask a question to the panelists in the last session of our event. And during the webinar, if you have any comment or need any assistance, please just raise your hand using the button and our event assistance team will contact you directly via chat. So now let's start with the event today. My name is Michelle Marie Farrell from the IFC Edge team, and I will be the moderator for this event. The event is co-organized by IFC Edge and Savills Vietnam in partnership with the UK government. This event is held to celebrate COP26, which is held in Glasgow early November, and also an opportunity to provide you with some update on the Vietnam green building market, sharing news and upcoming trends in green building. The topics that we will cover today are the latest market update of Vietnam, discussion of the importance of ESG in real estate sector, and how to unlock green potential for existing projects. So let me start first with the introduction of our special guests today. I would first like to welcome Mrs. Emily Hamblin, Her Excellency Consul General, County Director for Trade in Vietnam, British Consulate General in Ho Chi Minh City, and Mr. Neil MacGregor, Managing Director of Savills Vietnam. Neil will share Savills' vision on ESG and how important the role of ESG is in the real estate sector. And myself, Michelle Farrell, I am currently the Global Marketing and Business Development Lead on the Edge Green Building team for the IFC, International Finance Corporation. So please give an applause to Her Excellency Emily Hamblin, the Consulate General, County Director for Trade in Vietnam, British Consul General in Ho Chi Minh City. She will provide us with opening remarks for our event today, sharing the UK government's vision about climate change and international relationships with other countries in terms of green and sustainable development. So over to you, Your Excellency.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And yeah, thank you for inviting me along to open today's event on such an important topic. It's a real pleasure to be here and to be joining with you all today. And it's great to see so many people joining in online for this valuable conversation. And today I would like to share with you a little bit about why, as the UK government, we think that green buildings are the future and why the UK strongly supports green building development. And there are essentially two reasons, each of which I'll talk about in a little bit more detail in just a second. But briefly, firstly, it's because we care about the climate and about the environment, and we strongly believe that globally we need to be working together and doing whatever we can to protect our environment and to mitigate climate change. And secondly, and equally importantly, we believe that there are real opportunities for the private sector and for financial institutions to benefit from the low carbon transition. And the UK, and in particular our British businesses, have real expertise in green construction, and we're keen to find ways to share that for mutual benefit. So firstly, as I said, we care about climate change. And as many of you will, I'm sure, be aware, and as Michelle just mentioned, the UK successfully hosted COP26, the UN climate conference, in Glasgow just a few weeks ago. And we were really happy that during COP26, we saw increasing commitments from leadership globally, from leaders all around the world, to taking action in order to mitigate climate change, enabling us to collectively keep the objective of limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees alive. And with respect to Vietnam, we were particularly delighted and impressed with the commitments that Vietnam came forward with at COP26. So Prime Minister Pham Minh Chin's visit to the UK to attend COP26 included many relevant announcements in this space, including at a headline level, Vietnam committing to a new net zero emissions target by 2050, which is a hugely important and ambitious moment for Vietnam and for all of us globally in the fight against climate change. But in order to achieve this ambitious and important commitment, there will need to now be concerted efforts across all sectors. And building and construction have a particularly important role to play here. That's because buildings account for a fifth of global emissions, but there are huge opportunities to reduce carbon emissions through developing more energy efficient and more sustainable buildings. And I think that what we've really learned from the UK experience in this space is that it is definitely easier to start from the beginning and to bake in efficiency and sustainability from the outset of projects, rather than looking to improve or restore construction sites later on. And I think that puts Vietnam and Southeast Asia in a good position, actually, because Vietnam and Southeast Asian countries with young and dynamic populations and with rapidly growing economies have a lot of opportunities to act now to scale up a green building market in an efficient way. And as the UK, we're really keen to see that happen and to support however we can to make that happen. And secondly, as I said at the beginning, the focus on developing green buildings, as I've said, is so important for protecting the climate, protecting the environment, but it's not just about protecting the climate. It's also about delivering long-term benefits for investors, for developers, and for consumers. And there's a lot of evidence from the UK's experience, for example, about how expectations are shifting from both investors and from customers. And they're shifting towards a stronger demand for greener buildings. There's increasing appetite from investors and from banks to invest in green projects. And as the economy and living standards continue to grow, customers and homeowners want to live in sustainable and energy efficient buildings. So I think, given all of that, just to finish with a huge thank you to Savills and to IFC for organising today's event, and much more broadly for your leadership and your technical expertise and innovation in these areas, which, as I say, I think are so important and have so much potential to continue to grow. So I wish the event today lots of success, and I wish everyone good health. All the best. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much for joining us today, and we appreciate your time. Okay, so let's move on to the next section of our presentation. Thank you so much again, Your Excellency, for joining us today. And I will be moving on to the next section where I will be giving an overview of the EDGE program itself and how it relates to what we're talking about today specifically. So let me just get up my presentation. Okay. So what we're going to talk about today, and please, if anyone has any trouble hearing or anything happens, please let us know. I know some people have commented a couple times on this. If there's any problems, please let our team know and they will take care of it immediately. So what we are at Edge, and many of you are maybe familiar with Edge or not familiar with Edge, so I'll give you a bit of an overview today. So we are in the business of creating markets and creating opportunities in the green building sector. So what that looks like is we are part of the World Bank Group, and we sit in a division called IFC, the International Finance Corporation, which looks to find solutions in private sector development. So we're very interested in working with the private sector to develop these solutions, develop innovative ideas, work with these companies, and really come up with a way that we can interact with them and create a three-pronged approach to our offer for green buildings. So EDGE is just a portion of our whole green building transformation program, but it's a really important part of it. And the reason for that is it allows you to look at everything from the investment side all the way to the market creation. So giving a tool that can be used very easily and be able to be used worldwide. So on the investment side, we can certainly interact with people like banks, or if we're interacting with large companies, it could be green bonds that are being issued. We can give advice as well. So this is another thing, training for loan officers, developers, sustained technical advice, the CAFE tool, which is another tool that's out there, and the Green Mortgage Toolkit, which is very helpful.
Michelle,
and then finally in the market creation.
The screen.
What?
Please check the screen sharing. We do not see your screen sharing.
Okay, let me just check on that. Sorry about that. Should be on. Sorry. Okay. Let me try to, yeah, it doesn't seem to be. Expand, share screen, screen two. Okay, that should see something now. Do you see anything?
Yes, we do see your
okay,
laptop
just my
screen.
desktop.
Yeah,
and
please switch.
I'll switch them. Okay, do you see it now?
Get red.
Okay, sorry about that. I don't know why it stopped sharing it, but it's there again. Okay, my apologies for that. And please, again, let me know. Thank you very much, Fong, for telling me that. So we had just gone over where IFC fits into the solutions in private sector development and how that works inside of the World Bank Group as a company. And then the different strategies that we're able to give you advice upon. So whether that's investment, financial advice, and market creation are the 3 points that we touched on before. So building that local capacity, stakeholder education, technical advice, and promotion of incentives. So this could even be working with governments and anything that it takes to create a market for green buildings and their need and desire in the country. Okay, so what exactly is EDGE? EDGE is a standard, it's a certification program that goes from a free web-based application, which is available on our website. And you can always find out more. We have a YouTube channel. You can see the further resource down here is the EDGE software demo that will bring you directly through the software. It's an achievable standard. So we're looking to achieve 20% energy savings in 3 categories: energy, water, and embodied energy and materials. And then you can go up from there in the different standards. So you could do 40% and be EDGE advanced, or you could go all the way to 0 carbon. And then finally, we have a verified green label. This green label is recognized worldwide, and it's something that can be applied to each tenant space. And it's a great way to be able to communicate to the people that are in the building what exactly they're able to save and what the impacts of their interventions were. Okay, so let's give a bit of an update today on the Vietnam green building market. So this is the update for Q3 2021. The repartition of these certified projects and the GFA square meters can be seen on the pie chart. When Edge takes 50% of the green building market share in Vietnam, followed by Lead with 43.5%, Lotus ranked third with 6.5%. The percentage is calculated based on the square meters of GFA certified by each certification system. So you can see Edge is actually
Michelle,
quite...
could
yes.
you recess your screen again? I don't know why or what happened, and then you cannot see your screen anymore. So
do you
please,
want to share yours, Tom? Because it seems
no.
mine's having a problem.
Okay, let me.
Yeah, and then we can just go from there. Because it says I'm still sharing, so. Yeah, apologize for this, everybody. Okay, we can just go to the slide on the Q3 market update. Okay, so yes, again, speaking about the Q3 market update, you can see that the breakdown of the projects that we have now is that Edge takes 50% of the green building market share in Vietnam, followed by Lead, and then with 43.5%, with Lotus ranked third with 6.5%. The percentage is calculated based on the meters squared of gross floor area for each certification system. So you can see Edge is doing quite well and is very popular. Okay, next slide, please. We can also see that residential and industrial buildings are first and second place in green buildings certified. The two dominant with close to 80% of the total square meters certified by building types. Offices are ranked third, followed by hospitality and commercial. Education only takes 1%, and there is no green certified healthcare project yet to date. And next slide. Real estate companies are more and more interested in green buildings. On the screen, you can see the top largest developers in Vietnam by land stock. Our team has conducted research on these companies and find out that 6 of the 14 companies has planned or implemented integrated green building on their projects developments. And next slide. So let's talk about some of the upcoming building trends that are happening. Now we're going to go to the second point that I mentioned earlier about the upcoming building trends. At COP26, where net zero is now the most trending term and the goal of the event, Vietnam Prime Minister has also committed to achieve net zero emissions by 2050. So we have roughly 30 years more to change the construction sector towards net zero. Next slide. And that was a very quick update of the green building market in Vietnam as of quarter 3, 2021. So we just wanted to give you a bit of an update on that. So what else is happening? COP26 is finished with different goals and actions. As we work in the real estate sector, I would like to share with you some of the upcoming building trends in the green space. Number 1 trend is green financing. Number 2 would be the net zero carbon for all industries, including the real estate sector. The third is the potential of going green with existing and retrofit projects, where I can share with you more in detail the vision of Edge about retrofit buildings, while our guest speaker, Mr. Neil MacGregor, will later share his thoughts as a property management firm about this concept as well. So when you look at this graph, you can see that green building investment represents over a 24.7 trillion US dollar investment opportunity in emerging markets. This is not a small amount of money. This is something that we will definitely be able to gain and win from if you're looking to grow in the green building space, because the investment really is there. And I think that there's a lot of work that we need to do as IFC to bring together the investment side and the demand side as well, or produce that demand on the ground. Okay, next slide. So Vietnam's client smart business investment potential pulling out of that group is estimated at about 753 billion, with the majority going towards the country's transportation infrastructure needs by 2030. The potential investment in this renewable energy totals about 59 billion. Over half of that in solar PV and another 19 billion built in for small hydropower projects. New green buildings represent almost an $80 billion investment opportunity, and that isn't just in Vietnam. Okay, so let's go to some of the examples that we have. HSBC structured a green loan with Indospace, a large warehouse company in India, and one of the projects I've worked on a lot. Green loans are a sister instrument for green bonds and a certified way for green finance mechanisms. HSBC invested $130 million US into Indospace for refinance of a portfolio of EDGE certified warehouses. HSBC's green framework was audited by Cicero, a leading provider of second opinions in green finance. And you can certainly read more about this in the press release, but this was a very great example of how certification and having a green aspect to your building will open you up to these green loans and green aspects, but because we comply with all the green building standards. Okay, so next slide. So EDGE has 3 different certification levels, as I touched on before. So you have level 1, which is EDGE certified. So that means we're going to be achieving 20% or more savings in energy, water, and embodied energy and materials. The second level is level 2, which is EDGE advanced, or we can also refer to that as zero carbon ready. And what this is saying is you have to have 40% better on energy, but still 20% on water and 20% on embodied energy and materials. And then if you're going to go all the way to zero carbon, you would be actually going in and purchasing carbon offsets or having 100% renewables on site so that your bill by the end of the month is evening out at 0. So now let's talk a little bit about retrofit, because that is the subject of what we're discussing here today. So the EDGE retrofit program gives you a clear and sensible path on which you can take to go through and get instantaneous feedback on what are the most practical and simple ways that you could retrofit your building. And it will give you instantaneous feedback on those interventions. So next slide. So really we look at this as a 3-step process. As there is this goal in Vietnam to reach zero carbon by 2050, we have to start making a plan to get there. And this really lays out the aspects of that plan. And what we see in this plan is that at first we have to tackle our existing building portfolio. This is really where a lot of our energy is lying. Retrofitting, for example, is always more efficient than tearing down a building and building a brand new one. That's always going to be the case because you're reusing your existing materials, you're not doing demolition, and it's better for the environment. So we recommend that first, someone with a large portfolio would inventory the carbon footprint of their portfolio, assess refurbishment costs with EDGE, and then prioritize the least costly savings. So if you're looking at maybe a 2% cost investment with a 5-year payback period, that's the type of thing you can actually analyze inside of the software. Then make sure that all of your new buildings are reaching those goals. And that's something we should really aim to do by 2030. All of those should be zero carbon with the new buildings by 2030 without carbon credits is really the aim that has been set up. And then 100% embodied energy and materials in construction and demolition should be offset by 2050. So this is a great way to establish a generation plan for all of your portfolio projects. So first dealing with what your current projects are, your new projects, and then finally, how do you start to communicate that? So we can use the EDGE software to communicate to other tools like the Climate Bonds Initiative, the GRESB, for example, all the other sustainability-linked rating systems, as well as the bonds that can be linked to those as well. And that's going to give you ability to report on the progress with EDGE and greenhouse gas reporting. And then finally, by following this step, this is a great way to eventually bring your company to its goal by 2050. Okay, next slide. So what are some high impact interventions that we could look at? So today we wanted to talk about retrofit. It's very important. The majority of the buildings there are existing today. So what do we do when we go into a building? There are all different types of interventions that we could start looking at. So for example, for retail, we can look at high efficient cooling and heating systems, better ventilation, demand controlled ventilation, daylight sensors, efficient energy, and of course, on-site renewable energy is always going to be a great one to bring in. And for the next slide, when we look at homes, there may be some different things that we want to consider because these homes, if you're a developer, you're selling off the homes. So you want to make sure that you're investing in the right places. So you might look at high performance glass, better efficiency HVAC systems, insulation on the buildings, water saving fixtures is a huge thing that's going to get you there. Energy efficient lighting and controls, and solar hot water. Next slide, thanks. And then with hotels, this hotel is quite amazing in that it saved over, I think, $18,000 US per month in bills once they did the refurbishment. So they went for those low, very efficient cooling and heating systems. They went to the key power switch for the rooms, solar hot water, and a water treatment system and reuse. So this was quite a good case where they were able to save a lot on both energy and water costs. Okay, so when we look at this slide, you can see the path to finally getting to zero or net zero with EDGE. So first we look at our consumption baseline, then we look at operational changes, energy efficiency, light retrofitting, deep retrofitting. So what you saw in the previous slides were examples of, some operational changes, some energy efficiency changes, but then the deep retrofitting, which goes into the HVAC systems. And then finally, some of those which were on-site or off-site renewable energy, for example, the solar panels that we saw. So, and then if you're able to reach that 40% energy savings with these measures, then what you're able to do is do carbon offsetting. So consumption can remain within the established EUI limits. And this is what it's showing on the left-hand side as well. Okay, so let's look at some sample projects from retrofit that we've worked on personally lately. So one of the greatest examples, I think, is Lidl. So Lidl is in Greece, is the largest owner of certified green buildings because they did all of their stores. I think there's about 400 and something that are actually, and just across Greece, there's 215. And all of these were certified by EDGE. and they were able to reduce the costs of running their buildings significantly. They saved lots of CO2, a huge amount of water, and over their portfolio, a huge amount of energy as well. So this is not only saving them money, but it's being better for the environment, which is something that's very important to Lidl as a company. Then we can go into more industrial applications of this. So a leading logistics partner, WDP, set this as their corporate social responsibility. So what they did is they have been applying EDGE to 48 logistics buildings across the country, with warehouses ranging in size from 2,500 square meters to over 60,000 square meters. And this has been a huge savings. And if you know warehousing, you'll know the use of water as well. So you can see that there was a huge amount of savings of water. Lots of energy has been saved as well. And if you are renting out these properties to international companies, they're also very inclined to go with certified buildings. So if we go back to Indospace, for example, they were able to attract people like Amazon, Volvo, a bunch of different companies that do look at, is this building green certified? So we're looking at not just the fact that we're going to certify the building green and that's great for the environment, but we're looking at really attracting tenants, getting those really high international clients, and being able to sell your building on the international stage using this type of international certification system. Another example is ProCredit Bank. So they started incorporating some energy savings, but in 2013, they really embarked on a process to totally change the energy consumption of the building. And what they did is they actually did eventually bring this to EDGE to do the full portfolio analysis. So what they have is been able to put in all of this. It shows what energy that they've saved just for their headquarters, and the tons of CO2 that have been saved as well. And then NEO is another great example. Their office in the Philippines, they have 7 office buildings that they went and retrofitted. And all of those buildings actually are achieving net zero energy certification for their entire portfolio. And what they did is they saved that 40% in energy, and they bought off-site renewable energy as well. I think it was from a hydroelectric power plant. So this is the type of thing that you could look at doing to get to that net zero energy certification for your portfolio. All right, and yes, we just want to thank, of course, the European Union, the UK government, and other funding that we have gotten from Switzerland as well. So we always will thank our funders on these. Thank you very much. So now I'm going to pass it over to Neil to give his presentation. So let me stop here.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Michelle, for hosting and the great introduction to EDGE. And thank you, Emily, for your great support and for introducing today's program. Today, I'm going to speak about some updates and trends in the real estate environment in relation to ESG. what Savills is doing, and then I'll run through some case studies. So I'll start with a few comments around COP26. Obviously, there were lots of promises around net zero targets, and that's great and will impact real estate from an occupier's point of view. But for us, one of the key takeaways was that around private finance. So there are obviously big questions around how the transition to net zero will be financed. And the private sector will have to play an increasing role in that. And that is going to influence how the real estate industry adapts over time to seek green finance going forward. So specifically, why ESG in real estate? Real estate, as you've heard, is a massive contributor to energy and process-related emissions, almost 40% globally. And the focus is on building and construction, and that and its impact on those elements. Tackling climate change is therefore going to be a top priority for every property owner and occupier going forward. I think most in the audience are familiar with what ESG is, but a few highlights in relation to today's discussion: energy and water efficiency, waste and recycling, air and water pollution under the environmental heading, under the social heading, employment rights, health and safety, support for the community, and on the governance side, board diversity and independence, shareholder rights, transparency, some of the key aspects that would jump out in relation to real estate. So some terminology you should know following COP26 and all of the press around it, you'll have picked up on many of these phrases. So carbon neutral, any carbon emissions must be matched by an equivalent amount being removed. Net zero carbon, net zero emission means that all man-made greenhouse gas emissions must be removed from the atmosphere through reduction measures, and so forth. Operational carbon, the emissions from the building's energy consumption, and the definition from the Hong Kong Green Building Council of green buildings, a practice of reducing the environmental impact of buildings and enhancing the health and well-being of building occupants. So we've talked about the impact of the built environment on water usage, 16 to 17% of all water usage globally, and 40 to 50% of energy usage. But what we really need to look at is the full life cycle, and that also includes building waste that accounts for 40% of all solid waste and what can be done with that. The surveys suggest that 40% of occupiers have stated net zero carbon emissions, of whom 77% have set a target date as early as 2030. 85% of real estate choices will be changed by this commitment to some extent. In a survey conducted by Ming Tan Di, over 80% of respondents said that sustainability is an important or top-level priority for their organization. And 66% of respondents said sustainability is important to their property leasing and investment decisions. So clearly a huge impact on real estate, on the real estate market going forward. In Hong Kong, it's been estimated that 60% of greenhouse gas emissions come from energy used in buildings. But motivations for the sustainability agenda vary considerably, from protecting the environment to reducing costs and enhancing profits. to maintaining or expanding access to finance. So for many countries in the region, they are now making ESG reporting mandatory. And this is going to bring the sustainability agenda in real estate to the fore. So ESG reporting is already mandatory in Hong Kong for listed companies in Hong Kong, and Vietnam, China, New Zealand, Singapore, and India are all following in the next few years. So ESG reporting will cover energy use and emissions, labor practices, board diversity, and management. And it will be used to consider future risks as well as opportunities. And the goal is to aim for continuous improvement over time. And that's also what investors will be seeking. So specifically for occupiers, as we've heard, occupiers are embedding ESG in their business. They have to make those non-financial disclosures going forward. And there's a lot of pressure from shareholders with regards to ESG. We've heard that building and construction accounts for 39% of global carbon emissions. And therefore, occupiers will expect to have a mutual understanding from their landlords in terms of their own needs. They will be looking to green building rating systems, as Michelle has outlined, and manufacturing transformation, as per some of the case studies that Michelle ran through, will be significant for many occupiers. For asset owners, they're setting their own targets, for example, net zero by 2030. They'll have to manage upstream and downstream. They'll have to manage occupiers as well as contractors building their assets. And they'll have to make the most of green finance through being compliant. So green finance is going to change the way the industry looks at the development of buildings. As we know, climate change is a risk to many businesses, but it also represents an opportunity for growth. The green economy mark, those with a green economy mark outperformed the FTSE All Share Index by 5% in 2021 year to date. So it's already having an impact. So for investors, in terms of the consideration of social and environmental return, they'll be looking at lower energy costs in order to be able to charge higher rents, for example. Better buildings will offer more than just being greener. There will be other elements that will come with that, so that better will always attract a premium, whether that's a premium in rents or a premium in pricing. There will be brand impacts on a green building and possible brand damage if developers are not seen to be complying. And carbon offset costs will be higher for assets that are harder to decarbonize. You heard Michelle talking about whether to develop or refurbish. And investors who do not wish to develop or refurbish real estate assets will focus on acquiring assets that already have some form of high sustainability rating, or will be looking to retrofit as outlined. They'll be looking to create more sustainable real estate through refurbishment or development that will continue to be the high risk and high return area of the property market. ESG reporting is coming to Vietnam. Circular 96, that actually came out in 2020, will require listed companies to submit and publish ESG credentials in their annual report. Although we're still waiting for details, that is going to start to impact how occupiers, for example, or real estate developers look at their ESG frameworks. So a lot of debate around where the low-hanging fruit are. And residential is often regarded as more difficult because there are so many individuals involved, and that may require more government intervention. Commercial property is much smaller as a sector, and the size and value of each individual asset is generally larger. So it's easier to make significant gains. Ownership of commercial buildings is typically corporate or institutional, and they have their own ESG targets. So there's already strategies and agendas in place. Costs of obsolescence to ensure that an asset remains lettable are going to be increasingly important if the best rental rates are going to be achieved in the future. And there's an understanding around the different systems and accreditations. And as we've mentioned, the green finance element and the cost of green finance, as well as access, is going to be increasingly important. So in the office sector, tenant demand is already rising for greener office buildings. We've heard that, it's real, it's happening now. With the move towards more hybrid working, this is facilitating an acceleration of ESG compliant offices, not just from an energy efficient perspective, but also from a well-being, health and safety perspective. There is still a challenge on the supply side. There is a scarcity of green compliant buildings, and the rising costs of mitigating obsolescence through renovation and retrofit, which EDGE is trying to solve. There is already a green premium as investors seek out that limited stock of ESG friendly buildings. And there is a higher return investment for offices, as we've heard, given the larger project scale. Michelle presented some great examples of retail retrofitting, but the high energy costs in the retail sector, given the air conditioning requirements in Vietnam, for example, or the lighting requirements, make for some low-hanging fruit to make retail centers more ESG compliant. As I mentioned, residential may require more government intervention in order to encourage residential occupiers and developers to look at decarbonization. In logistics, aside from the obvious solar rooftop installation, which can have a huge impact and can make many manufacturers energy neutral very quickly, there's also the consideration of water usage and the treatment of wastewater, as we've heard. So what are Savills doing globally? Savills have committed to be net zero in terms of our own business by 2030. But more broadly, our ESG involves developing talent and promoting diversity, enhancing our social impact and improving the quality of education, health and well-being, achieving our net zero targets, providing expertise on energy and sustainability for clients to assist on their ESG agendas. Our approach has been to focus on 9 sustainable development goals out of those that have been introduced globally that we believe are most relevant to our business. And we're enhancing our ESG global strategy and reporting framework to reach those goals. We have a task force for climate-related disclosure involving all offices globally, and we're moving further on our journey towards those net zero goals. So these are the 9 UN Sustainable Development Goals that we are looking to apply through 5 strategic pillars. growth by maintaining a positive impact within the communities we serve, people, creating healthy workplace, developing talent and promoting diversity, disruption by achieving our net zero target by 2030 and influencing other stakeholders that we work with. Working with clients to bring together our energy and sustainability consultants as part of the global energy and sustainability hub. And through finance, enhancing our social impact and mitigating consequences associated with climate risk. So I'm going to talk about a few case studies that we are applying within our Vietnam business. The first being working with VinFast, a hot topic at the moment, to install their electric car charging stations and motorbikes within our property management portfolio. As we all know, urban air pollution is influenced significantly by transportation activities, and therefore encouraging the use of electric vehicles can make a big step towards Vietnam reaching its goals. So we look forward to rolling out these charging stations across Savills property management portfolio. We are already installing in 2 projects in Hanoi, with several more to follow in Hanoi and Ho Chi Minh City. We have also been applying energy saving initiatives across our portfolio with some fantastic results already. And we have been awarded prizes to those buildings who have achieved the largest savings. Some typical examples are increased interval of monitoring through the electric power meters, reduced operation hours for air conditioners in common areas, increased temperature setting for air conditioners in common areas, reduced operation hours of air blowers, and replacing halogen and compact lamps with LED lamps. So we're already applying benchmarks across our portfolio to arrive at typical energy savings that are possible for comparable buildings. And then some of our projects that we are working on at the moment. So we are currently the leasing agent for Capital Place in Hanoi, which has a LEED Gold certification. One of the most impressive green compliant buildings in the country. For those able to, I would thoroughly recommend a physical inspection of the building. If not, then we are able to also conduct remote viewings so that we can demonstrate some of the green credentials of this fantastic development by CapitaLand and Mitsubishi Estates. Next, lead advisors who are working closely with EDGE, and they already have their preliminary certificate. They have consciously saved 27% of energy compared to regular office buildings and 30% reduction in water consumption using the EDGE benchmarks. And similar with their Lead Advisors Tower. So Lead Advisors Place is located in Quang Kiem. Lead Advisors Tower is located in the west of Hanoi, where they have also achieved similar savings. And in the construction of the building, they've used 21% less embodied energy in the materials they've used. So we are partnering with EDGE in order to ensure that our clients have access to their tools and to work with EDGE on consulting our clients on how they can make significant energy savings using the EDGE benchmarking, but also the benchmarking across our own portfolios. So if we take commercial owners, the goals of applying the EDGE technology is to gain more multinational tenants, to underwrite higher rental performance, driving profitability, increase occupancy rates, ensure cost control, keeping management fees down, and to be able to take a portfolio approach using the benchmarking and thereby build brand equity across the portfolio for the developer. So that consultancy can start at the design stage, but more importantly for Savills, it is using that benchmarking to ensure that during operation, we work towards the zero carbon certification, the highest level, working with EDGE. So a few key trends to finish with. As we've heard, owners are going to be considering green finance and the access to capital and debt. Unfit office space without green credentials will start to impact rents and occupancy rates. Early economic obsolescence if a building is not green compliant. And the ESG transparency and reporting going forward is going to be increasingly important. Occupiers are focusing on the green credentials with an emphasis on healthy places and energy efficiency. And they're looking to enhance the environmental and social performance of a building through their own behavior as well. Investors, increased consideration of social and environmental return, the difficulty to justify demolition and new construction, and hence looking towards the retrofitting option, and the ability to seek a green premium through ESG compliant investment strategies. So what can an advisory business such as Savills do to help? We can help owners to become more proactive in how they look at their green credentials and their ESG strategies. We can help with ESG reporting and risk assessments, and we can work with them to reposition for ESG compliance and gain access to green finance. For sellers looking to sell a building, we can help present their ESG credentials. We can work with them to gain certification and leverage that certification when achieved. We can work with the seller on an ESG audit report that can be used in marketing materials. And we can look at embodied carbon in any refurbishment plan. For buyers, we can assess the credentials and certifications of a target building for future proofing. We can look at the impact of anticipated regulatory changes and any costs associated with that post-acquisition. We can look at sustainability, risk assessments, look at any impacts on insurance, and look at tenant compliance to date and what may need to be put in place for tenant compliance post-acquisition. Thank you very much for your time. I hope those insights have proved useful, and I look forward to the Q&A. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Neil, for your informative presentation on the ESG strategy of Savills Vietnam and their initiatives within the ESG framework. So now it's time for us to have a couple questions for you. I know that you have a kind of hard stop at around 10:30, so I'll ask you your questions first. So from your presentation, you had mentioned that you manage 3 green certified buildings. Do you have any plans to increase these numbers, and how do you help an owner plan ahead to reach certification?
So absolutely, we would love to increase the percentage of our portfolio under management with green credentials. Aside from those mentioned, there are others also. But what we can do is work with owners to look towards certification of their buildings and work with EDGE in that regard. But more importantly, through our initiatives that we've outlined such as the energy saving. We can look at the M&E systems across the building and where modifications can be made. And also look at the installation of things like the EV charging stations and other aspects to help developers move their buildings towards being more ESG compliant. That may also include aspects other than energy and water. It may also include aspects such as well-being. And these can all be included in ESG reporting when that becomes a requirement going forward, and certainly when marketing to occupiers who are going to increasingly look towards ESG compliant buildings.
Okay, and then you also mentioned that tenant demand is increasing now for this. And do you have any idea of the numbers or the percentage on this? Do you, as a leasing agent, do you see like 20% of people asking for this? Or is it something that you bring to the client as an option with the building?
So globally, I think I gave a number of 75% of all companies have committed to some form of net zero. So clearly those occupiers are going to be looking at their office space, both their own space and that of a building. And that will start to mean that ESG compliant buildings are able to attract a rental premium. And that process is just beginning in Vietnam. It's still quite an early stage. Amongst global corporates, we're already seeing demand. And some Vietnamese companies are also indicating that they will prioritize green compliant buildings.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
And do we have any, Phong, go ahead. Are there any further questions?
We got question from audience. The question is for Ne. Are there opportunity to collaborate with Savills advisory practitioner in Southeast Asia regions? Is question from Mr. Jaguti Vora.
Certainly. So we are going to be working with Edge to consult developers, both at the design stage and also during the operational stage, in order to meet the Edge certification criteria. So very open to working with any interested parties on applying those credentials.
Thank you. Over to you, Michelle.
Okay, so those are the questions that I have for Neil. So should I go on to the questions for myself as well? Phong?
So I got questions for Michelle for Edge retrofit. How do you define the baseline of the buildings?
Okay, so the baseline is set up on a global context. So we are actually taking a baseline from the exact type of building that is, it's going to depend if you're doing retrofit or a new building, but your baseline is always going to be the typical building in that market. So a building that you would be comparing against in, let's say, India versus Vietnam versus the United States, all of these baselines are going to be different because what is typical in the markets is very different as a standard. So we would either use the building codes that are there to regulate it, or we would use typical building practices. So this is how we establish a baseline to compare against. Then that baseline is what we say, you must be 20% better than on these standard practices for your region, which I think is something that makes it very unique. You're not comparing against a You know, you don't have to hire a huge consultancy firm to run all of the numbers and go through it. It's a very interactive tool. You can immediately see the payback period on your interventions in the local currency as well. So this is why it's quite powerful in emerging markets, because it shows you that 1 to 2 year payback period often with not more than a 2% incremental increase in cost. And this is, again, something different than you get with some of the other rating systems, as it was developed to be used in all markets, not just in developed ones. So we're looking at this in a way, when you go to retrofit, you're still comparing against the baseline, but you're comparing your existing building against the baseline, which may be actually better or worse off than it. And then what you do is you have to bring that building. So let's say you're negative 10% energy, which means you're 10% worse than the building code is requiring you to be. So you have to get up, you have to make up that 10%, then you would have to make up the other 20% to get to the top and be able to say that I'm 20% to reach EDGE certification. So the baseline is always a consideration no matter what you're doing.
Yeah, thank you. Another question for Nay. Could you share how much the maintenance would be for commercial residential building when applying EDGE? And the second question for both, could you share a bit more about refinancing limit for Hồ Chí Minh market generally and residential specifically? What are the requirements needed?
Okay, so I think what Michelle's been saying about EDGE is that in terms of the utilization of EDGE itself, the costs are minimal. In terms of the actual maintenance of a given building, it would be very project specific. So we would need to look very carefully at the building itself and carry out an audit working with the EDGE platform to look at the costs of maintaining the EDGE certification going forward. And that's something we're already doing with some clients. In terms of the green financing, there are a number of banks now specifically looking at green financing, and I'd be happy to put any developer in touch with them. Again, they will have their own requirements, and I can't really speak on their behalf.
Okay, another question for Michelle. How can we best get new technology onto market, such as 1 megawatt power plant, green prefabricated wall panel made out of construction rubbish, waste to energy plant, etc.?
Yeah, that's an interesting question because in EDGE, we are looking at very typical material interventions often, but when you have something which is a new technology, if we do something which is SRR, special ruling request. So if you had incorporated green prefabricated panels made out of construction rubbish, which I'm reading your question right now, if you were to incorporate those into it, your embodied energy and materials would be significantly less. So you could give us all the details on that material, and we would be able to include that and incorporate that into the EDGE analysis. But it is something that would have to go under a special ruling request. But otherwise, it can be definitely brought in. And then waste to energy plants, we can definitely consider those as well. It's just something that's not straightforward and built into the software. So it's something, again, that requires a special ruling request. But again, if it's not available through a drop-down menu, this is something that I want to express. It does not mean it's not available. It's just not there right in front of your face necessarily. And we can always come up with a way to incorporate all of these new technologies into the tool.
Yeah, another questions, and I think this will be the last question for the event, as we already have 5 minutes passes. This question may be for Michelle. Which building material will got the most impact during the edge process and certify?
Which building material has the most impact? Well, why don't you answer that, Phong, because you're working in Vietnam. So I'm based in Washington, D.C. So you can say, what do you find is the most impactful material in Vietnam?
So currently in edge applications, we assess the building material based on the embodied energy. So the two largest proportion of embodied energy in a building will be the floor slab and the building envelope. So please priority your focus on that by selecting the low embodied energies and construction technology for those two building structure part is a floor slab and building envelope.
Yeah, and things like aerated concrete blocks and these sort of things, they're not only going to benefit you on the side of the embodied energy and materials, but they're going to benefit you on the insulation side as well. So you're able to up the insulation of your building at the same time getting a better rating on your overall energy. Okay, so what are the guidelines and quality standards for these projects? Project technologies. Basically, you would submit the material specifications to us and we would come up with a way to put it in. The material specifications must be quite clear and have the construction of the material all built out and show the U values of all those materials and also the details of all the construction of that material. So as long as we have all of that data, that's something that we can incorporate into the software.
Okay, thank you for your interesting questions, and I think is we believe that we have provide to you some informative and helpful update about rebuilding and rebuilding trends today. So before leaving the event, please spend a few minutes to enter your opinions on the survey link that I share in the chat, and look forward to meet you next time in our next rebuilding update series together with Savills and IFC. And once again, thank you for your time, Mr. MacGregor and Michelle Farrell, for your wonderful presentation today.
Great, thank you. And thank you for your patience at the beginning, everyone, with our technical difficulties.